Salvete. Today's lesson is on Chapter 30 in Wheelock's Latin. And today we're going to learn the final two tenses of the subjunctive, and we're going to learn one more subordinate subjunctive clause. And then we're also going to learn something called the sequence of tenses. This is guidelines or rules as to what tense of the subjunctive you can use in a subordinate subjunctive clause based on the tense of the main verb. So I know that probably sounds a little jumbled and whatever, but it'll make sense. Just give me a second. Give me a couple slides, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so last two tenses of the subjunctive are the perfect subjunctive and pluperfect subjunctive. Remember, there is no such thing as a future subjunctive, or a future perfect subjunctive for that case. And if you want to be able to tell something in the future using the subjunctive, there are sort of other ways, circumlocucious ways, for you to be able to do it. And actually, we're going to talk about one in this very video. So there you go. Okay, to form the perfect active subjunctive, you need your perfect active stem, and then you add the letters E-R-I, and then the personal endings. I decided to remind you guys of the personal endings here in this little box down here. The personal ending for the first person singular that we use for perfect and pluperfect active subjunctive is the M, not the O. So M-S-T, okay, M-S-T, mustis, okay? The perfect passive subjunctive is going to be the fourth principal part, right? The perfect passive participle for the first word. And then the second word is going to be the present subjunctive of the verb sum. So sem, si, sit, simi, sit, sit. Now this is interesting, right? Because the perfect passive indicative is, the first word is the fourth principal part, and the second word is the indicative of the verb sum. So actually it follows a pattern you're pretty familiar with, okay? Pluperfect active subjunctive, again, you need your present stem. You add ISSE and then the personal endings. So another way to think about this, of course, is the perfect active infinitive plus the personal endings. And then the pluperfect passive subjunctive is also two words. First word is the fourth principal part. Second word is the imperfect subjunctive of the verb sum. Now quickly, I'm going to go through one from each of the conjugations. I have examples here. So you can see the perfect active subjunctive is the perfect stem, perfect active stem, laudav, plus eri, plus these personal endings, right? Perfect passive subjunctive is the first word is the fourth principal part, laudatis, laudata, laudatum, sim, si, sit, laudati, laudati, laudata, sima, sidis, sent, okay? And then pluperfect active subjunctive is the perfect active stem, laudav, plus isse, and then your personal ending m, right? So lauda wisem, or again, another way to think about it is lauda wisse, which is the perfect active infinitive, plus the personal ending. So lauda wisem, lauda wisses, lauda wisset, lauda wissemus, lauda wissetus, lauda wissent, okay? And then our pluperfect passive subjunctive is going to be our fourth principal part, so our perfect passive participle, plus the imperfect subjunctive conjugation of the verb to be. So laudatis, laudata, laudatum, essem, esses, essest, laudati, laudati, laudata, essemus, essetus, essent. Okay? Now, the best way for you guys to start memorizing these words are to keep writing out the pattern, right? So I am going to quickly flip through the rest of the conjugations, but I want you to have these in your notes. So make sure that you write these out in your notes, okay, and be prepared to show them to me tomorrow, okay? Monio, monere, monui, monotum, we have in the perfect active and perfect passive subjunctive, pluperfect active, pluperfect passive subjunctive. Ago, agere, agi, actum in the perfect active subjunctive, perfect passive subjunctive, pluperfect active, pluperfect passive subjunctive. Capio, capora, capi, captum in the perfect active and passive subjunctive, pluperfect active and passive subjunctive. And then our fourth conjugation, audio, audire, audivi, auditum, in the perfect active and passive subjunctive, and in the pluperfect active and passive subjunctive. Okay, so now the next thing I want to talk to you guys about, those are the forms that you guys have to learn. You have to memorize how to form the perfect and pluperfect subjunctive in the active and the passive. The next conceptual thing I want to talk to you guys about is the sequence of tenses. Okay, so the sequence of tenses governs what tense the verb in a subjunctive subordinate clause can be. Okay, so depending on what the tense of the main verb in the main clause is, that will determine what the subjunctive subordinate verb can be, okay? So, there are two sequences. There is primary sequence and there is historical sequence, sometimes called secondary sequence. You are going to be in primary sequence if the verb in the main clause is present tense, future tense, or future perfect tense, okay? So, doesn't matter what mood it is, doesn't matter what voice it is, it only matters the tense. If the tense is present, future, or future perfect, you are in primary sequence. If you are in primary sequence, the verb in your subjunctive subordinate clause can only be present or perfect. Okay, so you can only have a present subjunctive or a perfect subjunctive in your subjunctive subordinate clause. So in your purpose clause, in your result clause, in your indirect question, which is what we're going to do a little bit later on. Okay, so if you want to show that the action in your subjunctive subordinate clause is happening at the same time as the action in the main clause, you use the present subjunctive. If you want to show that it's happening before, you use the perfect subjunctive. Now, if you are using the imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect tense, now you are in secondary or historical sequence. So you can only use an imperfect subjunctive or a pluperfect subjunctive in your subjunctive subordinate clause, okay? So if you have a present verb in your main clause, you can never have an imperfect or a pluperfect subjunctive in your subjunctive subordinate clause. And vice versa. If you have a perfect verb in your main clause, you can never have a present or a perfect subjunctive in your subjunctive subordinate clause. This is the rules that tell you which tense you may or, in fact, have to use. In historical sequence, if you want to show that the action in the subjunctive subordinate clause happened at the same time as the action of the main clause, you use an imperfect subjunctive. And if you want to show that it happened before, you use a pluperfect subjunctive. Okay? All right, that is the sequence of tenses. The last kind of conceptual thing I want to talk about in this video is one more subjunctive subordinate clause called the indirect question. Now, this allows you to, as you can guess, indirectly ask questions. And it's set up not with ut or nay or anything like that. It's set up with a question word, okay? So quis or quid, who or what, qui, quae, quod, the interrogative adjective, quando, ubi, quam, cur, unde, uter, utraman, or even, by the way, the enclitic ne that makes a statement into a question. You need to have one of these words plus a verb in the subjunctive. And that's an indirect question. That's how you set up an indirect question. And of course, you're going to translate the indirect question based on whatever question word you've set it up with. If you wonder where, ubi, your friends went, right? Or you wonder why someone spilled your milk. You wonder how people can be so mean. So on and so forth. These are indirect questions set up by the question word having the verb in the subjunctive mood. There you go. Now, okay, sometimes the indirect question has to be able to ask a question in the future, but of course, there's no such thing as a future subjunctive. So, indirect questions will sometimes employ this construction called the future active periphrastic, which is when you use the future active participle plus the subjunctive of sum, present subjunctive of sum, to express the future. So future active participle plus sem or cease or sit, simus, situs, or sent, okay? This is kind of bending the rules because of necessity, right? You sometimes have to ask, how will something happen? You may need to indirectly ask whether someone will go or will move or will whatever. And so in order to do that, you employ this construction called the future active periphrastic, which is not an extremely common construction in Latin literature, but you should still at least know about it. Now, I have got these sentences for you to practice the indirect question. And I have set these up according to the sequence of tenses. So, rogant quando familia mea perveniat versus rogant quando familia mea pervenerit. Okay? So, in the first one, they ask when my family arrives. So, we have a verb. And here, let me get my pen ready. We have a verb in the main clause, rogant, which is present active indicative. And then we have the present subjunctive in our indirect question that's being set up by quando, right? And since this is present, it's telling me that this needs to translate as happening at the same time as this. So they ask when my family arrives. Okay. Now, in this next sentence, we still have the indirect question, quando familia mea pervenerit, but now we no longer have the present subjunctive. We have the perfect subjunctive. So this is telling me that the action that happens here in this indirect question happened before rogant. So we have to translate accordingly. They ask when my family arrived. Past tense. Now, in this next pair of sentences, we still have an indirect question set up by cur, and then we have our verbs, right? Now, in this case, the main verb in the main clause is rogavimus, which is perfect indicative, right? Rogavimus, perfect indicative, which means we can no longer have the present subjunctive or the perfect subjunctive in our indirect question. We have to have imperfect or pluperfect subjunctive. This imperfect subjunctive tells me that when we translate this indirect question, it has to happen at the same time as rogavimus, as the perfect tense. Whereas when we translate this one, with the pluperfect subjunctive, it has to happen before rogavimus, before the perfect, so in the pluperfect, which makes a lot of sense. So rogavimus, we asked why you did this. We asked perfect why you did perfect this. In the next example, we asked why you had done this. Okay. In this next example, we still have an indirect statement, same as up here, but this time we have the future active participle plus according to the sequence of tenses, the imperfect conjugation, subjunctive conjugation of the verb to be. So we asked why you would do this. Okay. Next set of examples, rogat. He asks quis who possit. Present subjunctive, because we're in primary sequence, because we have a present verb, right, in the main sentence. So we know our indirect question is going to be quis urbum servare possit, servare patuit, and then our servatur is set. So he asks who is able to save the city. He asks who was able to save the city, and he asks who will save the city. Okay. I hope that this has been helpful. I will see you tomorrow in class, so make sure you take good notes and be prepared to show them to me tomorrow. And I hope you have a lovely evening. Walete.